Chopping oblong vegetables such as zucchini, leeks, or summer squash is easiest if you first create a stable, flat side. You can trim a thin sliver from one side of the vegetable, or simply cut the vegetable in half lengthwise, as we've done here. Turn the vegetable flat side down, and then slice as desired. Roughly chopping a round vegetable is a three-step process. First, cut the vegetable into rounds. Stack several rounds and cut them into strips. Finally, turn the knife 90 degrees and cut across the strips to yield small pieces. For perfectly executed fine dice, 1/4 inch or smaller, cut the vegetable into very thin strips, or matchsticks. Then cut the matchsticks crosswise into very small pieces. Vegetables can be cut into thin strips that resemble matchsticks. Start by cutting the vegetable into 2-inch lengths. Slice the lengths into 1/4 inch thick planks. Lay the planks flat and cut them into 1/4 inch strips that will be 2 inches long. Cutting vegetables into neat cubes is a 4-step process. First, trim the sides to create a flat surface. Then cut the vegetable into even planks. Next, stack several planks on top of each other and cut them lengthwise into strips, and then crosswise into cubes. Make each of these cuts 1/2 inch apart to yield perfect 1/2-inch cubes. The blade's heel is the sturdiest part, giving the thickest cutting edge for hacking chicken bones, cutting hard Parmesan, or splitting squash. To apply a lot of force with the heel, hold the handle and place the flat palm of your other hand over the blade's end, and cut down through the food. Tuck the fingers on the hand holding the ingredient away from the knife in a bear claw to hold the food in place. Your knuckles should rest against the side of the blade, providing guidance while minimizing danger. During the upward motion of slicing, reposition your guiding hand for the next cut. For most cutting and chopping, the knife is held with the blade perpendicular to the food. Slicing on the bias requires a different position for the blade, which should be held at a 45-degree angle in relation to the vegetable. Slicing on the bias yields longer slices. In this case, a narrow carrot is turned into wide ovals. To make fast work of mincing ingredients like fresh herbs and garlic, place one hand on the handle. Rest the fingers of the other hand on top of the knife. This light two-handed grip facilitates the up and down rocking motion needed for quick mincing. To make sure the food is evenly minced, pivot the knife as you chop. For most cutting and chopping, the knife blade is moved decisively through the food being sliced. A boning knife is sometimes used differently to cut fat or connective tissue from meat. In this case, the motion is more like a sawing motion. Use the middle of the knife blade to cut through medium to large vegetables, as well as to trim many small vegetables. Here, the green beans are lined up, so that with one stroke, the middle of the knife blade can be used to trim the ends from a pile of beans. Use the side of the blade to crush ingredients. Here, the side of the blade is placed over an olive and pressed with the palm of the other hand to loosen the flesh from the pit. Use the same motion to loosen the skin from a garlic clove. The tip of the knife blade offers the most control and should be used for precision work, such as slicing a carrot into 1/4 inch rounds. Unless otherwise indicated, all caloric values are for one serving. If the recipe offers a range of servings, for instance 4 to 6 servings, caloric values are based on the average number of servings. In this case, 5. All caloric values were calculated using the Food Processor SQL software program, published by EHSA Research. Serving sizes are designed for generous portions and assume that only one main course or one dessert is being served. If many dishes are on the table, you will get more servings from each recipe. All times include preparation and cooking. Times also include chilling, marinating, or resting, unless otherwise indicated. Times listed within recipe directions will vary from stovetop to stovetop or from oven to oven. Rely on visual clues, and be sure to check food before the given time to prevent overcooking. Many meat and poultry recipes include an internal temperature to which food should be cooked. This is the most accurate way to judge when food is properly cooked. Otherwise, you will need to rely on visual clues in the recipe. Note that the temperature of some foods, such as large roasts, will continue to rise as it rests, and this is accounted for in recipes. All recipes have been tested on gas and electric stovetops designed for home use. You may need to adjust burner temperatures, especially if using a powerful commercial-style stovetop or weak electric stovetop. All temperatures and recipes are listed in Fahrenheit. Difficulty level, easy, normal, or challenging, has been assigned to each recipe based on several factors. These include comparison to other similar recipes, types of cooking techniques required, and overall time required. Read the recipe from beginning to end before you start so that you can gather all necessary ingredients and equipment. Doing so will also help you understand the general sequence of steps and timing required for preparing the dish. Prepare all ingredients before you start to cook. Put each prepared ingredient into a separate bowl so you can access it easily as you cook. Trying to measure or prepare ingredients while cooking compromises your focus and increases the risk of overcooking. Cutting fruits, vegetables, and other ingredients into the correct size is important to ensure proper cooking. Minced ingredients should be cut into pieces measuring no more than 1/8 of an inch. Chopped fine means ingredients cut into 1/8 to 1/4 inch pieces. Chopped medium means ingredients cut into 1/4 to 1/2 inch pieces. Chopped coarse means ingredients cut into 1/2 to 3/4 inch pieces. Keep substitutions to a minimum to guarantee best results. Recipes were developed with regular dairy products unless otherwise noted. In general, low-fat dairy products can be substituted for full-fat ones, but non-fat dairy products will not work well in many recipes. Likewise, sugar substitutes are not recommended, as they will compromise the flavor and texture of many dishes. Dry ingredients should be measured in metal or plastic dry measuring cups with handles. Dip the cup into dry ingredients and then use a butter knife or small spatula to sweep off the excess. This guarantees a full measure. Measure liquids in liquid measuring cups with graduated lines. Bend down to see when enough liquid has been added to hit the desired line. All recipes were developed with medium-sized fruits and vegetables, unless otherwise noted. For example, 1 medium onion will yield 1 cup when chopped, and 1 medium garlic clove will yield 1 teaspoon when minced. All recipes were developed with unsalted butter, unless otherwise noted. We think unsalted butter has a fresher flavor than salted butter. You can replace unsalted butter with an equal amount of salted butter if you take out 3/8 of a teaspoon of salt for each stick of butter called for. All recipes were developed with large eggs, which weigh 2 ounces each. You can use other sizes, but weigh them to find how many to use. All recipes were developed with all-purpose flour, unless otherwise noted. To us, unbleached flour has a better flavor than bleached, above all in biscuits or breads. But either will work in recipes calling for all-purpose flour. Note that recipes calling for cake or bread flour should be prepared with those flours. All-purpose flour will give inferior results in these recipes. All recipes were developed with granulated sugar, unless otherwise noted. All recipes were developed with table salt, unless otherwise noted. Kosher or sea salt can be used to season food, but table salt is best for baking recipes, or when a specific quantity is listed. Freshly ground pepper is essential. The pre-ground pepper sold in jars in the supermarket has little flavor. All recipes were developed with ground spices unless otherwise noted. Be sure to use fresh spices that are no more than a year old. All ingredient lists refer to cheese by weight, while instructions give the volume you should have once it's grated or shredded. Note that different tools will produce varying volumes of grated or shredded cheese from the same weight of cheese. Grate all hard cheese with a rasp grater. Shred all semi-firm cheese on the large holes of a box grater. All fruits, vegetables, greens, and herbs should be washed and dried before use. For maximum food safety, the temperature inside your refrigerator should be 33 to 36 degrees. For maximum food safety, the temperature inside your freezer should be 0 degrees or below. Food bacteria multiply quickly between 40 and 140 degrees. The time food spends in this temperature range should be limited to 2 hours. Don't cool soup on the counter for hours on end. Cool soups, stews, and other foods on the counter until no longer hot, and then refrigerate them. Speed cooking up by dividing foods into small batches. Chilled foods, such as potato salads, shouldn't be out of the fridge for more than an hour. Never place cooked food on a plate or cutting board that has come in contact with raw food, unless it has been properly sanitized. For instance, don't put cooked steaks on the same platter used to carry the raw meat to the grill. Foods that are eaten raw, such as fruits and lettuce, must never come in contact with raw meat, poultry, or fish. This means using a separate cutting board for preparing fruits and vegetables. Get in the habit of washing cutting boards, knives, and your hands often when cooking. This will limit the spread of bacteria in your kitchen. Plastic cutting boards can go in the dishwasher. Wood boards and knives should be washed in hot, soapy water. Be sure to wash dish towels and replace sponges often. Sponges can be sanitized in a pot of boiling water. Thawing food at room temperature is an invitation for bacteria to multiply. The best way to thaw food is in the refrigerator. Put frozen food on a plate to trap exuded liquid and plan ahead. Steaks or chops take a day to defrost in the fridge. A big turkey can take 4 days to defrost. Browning meat is a key step when making stews and stir-fries. To maximize browning, cook large quantities of meat in small batches. There should be a little space between each piece of meat as it cooks, so that steam can evaporate. If you overcrowd the pot, the meat will stew in its own juices and won't brown properly. The grime on a grill's cooking grate can impart off flavors to delicate foods such as fish, chicken, and vegetables. A dirty grate can also cause food to stick. To prevent this, scrape the grate clean after preheating. Then slick it down with a bit of vegetable oil. Simply dip a wad of paper towels in vegetable oil, grab the towels with grill tongs, and wipe the grate thoroughly. Use at least 4 quarts of water to cook 1 pound of pasta. All that water keeps the pasta from sticking together. Use a big pot, about 8 quarts, and add 1 tablespoon of salt along with the pasta. But don't add oil to the water. The pasta won't stick as long as you stir it now and then, especially during the first few minutes. And the oil will make the pasta too slick. What separates a decent sauce from a great one? All the browned bits left in the pan after the vegetables or meat have been browned. And how do you get those browned bits into your sauce? We use a technique called deglazing. Add liquid, usually broth or wine, to the pan, and use a wooden spoon to scrape the bottom to loosen browned bits which dissolve into the liquid. Browning meat develops flavor and is a crucial step in countless recipes. Dry food will brown better than wet food. For that reason, we generally blot meat dry with paper towels just before cooking it. Season meat, fish, and chicken right before cooking, so the salt can flavor the food without drawing moisture to the surface, inhibiting browning. Folding is a technique used to combine delicate ingredients, such as adding egg whites to a soufflé batter. The technique is simple. Add egg whites or other delicate ingredients, including whipped cream. Then use a rubber spatula to combine. Scoop or lift rather than stirring. Generally, items that are folded together shouldn't be perfectly combined. A few streaks of egg whites in a soufflé batter is just fine. Frying's not scary if you follow a few rules. Use a big, deep pot with just an inch or 2 of oil. Leave lots of room for food so oil can't bubble out. Clip a candy or deep fry thermometer to the side of the pot with the probe in the oil to make sure the oil is neither too hot nor too cold. Depending on the recipe, frying generally requires oil heated to 325 to 375 degrees. A griller's biggest mistake is too much heat, which burns food on the outside before it's cooked all the way through. The solution is simple. Make 2 cooking zones on your grill. Sear foods on the hot zone and cook them through on the cool zone. On a gas grill, just turn down 1 burner. On a charcoal grill, bank more of the coals on one side of the grill and put fewer coals on the other side. It's crucial to heat pans properly prior to adding food. If the pan is too cool, the food can stick, and it certainly won't brown in a cool pan. Add oil to a pot before turning on the heat. When the oil shimmers, the pan is hot enough to cook veggies and delicate foods like chicken or fish. To cook meat, wait for the first wisp of smoke from the oil to add food. If the oil starts to smoke heavily, the oil will turn bitter and impart bad flavor. We prevent pan sticking by lining baking pans with foil and greasing with vegetable oil cooking spray. The batter is poured in and baked. When cool, simply grab the foil sling to lift the brownies or other baked goods right out of the pan. The foil peels right off, and now you can cut the brownies into neat squares. How do pro bakers turn out batch after batch of cookies and never have them stick or tear? Their secret is parchment paper. We bake most of our cookies on parchment-lined baking sheets. We also use parchment to line cake pans. Parchment is 100% reliable and cuts down on the mess, so pans require little or no scrubbing. What's the secret to salad dressing that's nicely emulsified and smooth? Chefs might whisk the oil slowly into the vinegar. but placing all the ingredients into a jar and shaking works just as well with less hassle. We often use the oven rather than the stovetop for cooking stews, rice dishes, and other recipes that require long, slow simmering. On the stovetop, food on the bottom of the pot can scorch. Frequent stirring can mitigate this problem, but we prefer to let the even, gentle heat of the oven do the job, with little or no stirring required. Pan-searing fish, chicken, or meat requires a super hot pan and plenty of elbow room. Not for the cook, but for the food. If you crowd items in the pan, they will steam and stew. To maximize browning when pan-searing, leave at least ½ inch of space between each piece of fish, chicken, or meat. Adjust oven racks according to the recipe. Also, make sure to give your oven at least 15 minutes to preheat. Most ovens cycle on and off to reach temperature, which takes 15 minutes. Finally, it's smart to keep a cheap oven thermometer in your oven. Over time, most ovens will begin to run too hot or cold, affecting baking times. An oven thermometer helps you adjust the temperature. Wood chips give grilled foods smoke flavor, but not if the chips go up in flames. When using a charcoal grill, soak the chips and then wrap them in a foil packet, which protects them from the fire. A few holes poked in the foil allow smoke to escape as the chips gently smolder. How do you impart smoky flavor to foods on a gas grill? A disposable aluminum tray filled with soaked wood chips does the trick. Simply place the tray with the wood chips on the primary burner. Replace the cooking grate and then light the grill. By the time the grill is hot, the chips will start to smolder and smoke. Pureeing gives soups a silky smooth texture, but only if the hot soup stays in the blender. Never fill the blender more than halfway with hot soup. Hold the lid in place with a folded kitchen towel and your hand. The difference between a juicy steak and a dry, tough one can be as simple as a 5-minute rest after cooking. If you let the meat rest on a platter tinted with foil, the meat proteins will relax. This should take 5 minutes for steaks and chops, and 10 to 20 minutes for big roasts. The proteins will then do a better job of holding on to those precious juices. Shocking foods in an ice bath, a bowl filled with ice water, is the quickest way to stop the cooking process. Use this technique with blanched vegetables to set their color and prevent residual heat from softening them further. This technique also works well with hard-boiled eggs and prevents yolks from developing that awful greenish ring. What's the best way to remove fat from soups and stews? Turn off the heat so the liquid stops simmering and wait a few minutes. The fat will float to the top where it can be skimmed off with a wide spoon and discarded. Flour is our thickener of choice in countless sauces, stews, and soups. To cook off its floury taste, add the flour before the liquids and let the flour cook with the aromatic veggies for a minute or two. You can then whisk in the broth or other liquids. The flour will thicken these liquids as they simmer. Toasting nuts brings out their flavor and is a crucial step in recipes that call for nuts. You can spread them over a rimmed baking sheet and toast in a 350-degree oven until fragrant. This will take 7 to 10 minutes. For small amounts, we prefer to toast nuts in a skillet on medium heat for 3 to 5 minutes. Once fragrant, remove from the skillet so they don't scorch. For many recipes, cream and egg whites are whipped to soft peaks. This means the cream or egg whites will have thickened considerably, but still remain soft. When the beater is lifted from the bowl, cream or egg whites should cling to the beater, but droop slightly. For many recipes, cream and egg whites are whipped to stiff peaks. This means the cream or egg whites will have thickened considerably. When the beater is lifted from the bowl, the cream or egg whites should cling to the beater and hold its shape without drooping. If the mixture is too soft to hold its shape, beat for a few more seconds and test again. If it looks curdled or grainy, you overbeat it. To slice apples, start by cutting the sides away from the core. You should have 4 pieces. Lay each piece flat side down on the cutting board and cut the apple into slices. Asparagus spears have a tough, woody portion that must be removed. Remove 1 spear from the bunch and bend it at the thick end until it snaps. With the broken asparagus as a guide, trim the tough ends from the remaining asparagus with a knife. To remove the flesh neatly from an avocado, start by cutting around the ends, then twist with your hands to separate the halves. Lodge the knife into the pit and then twist to remove the pit. Use a wooden spoon to knock the pit off the blade and discard. Use a towel to hold the avocado half steady. Make half-inch crosshatch cuts in the flesh, cutting down to, but not through the skin. Separate the diced avocado from the skin with a soup spoon inserted between the skin and flesh. Freezing bacon for 15 minutes will make it firmer and easier to chop. Once slightly frozen, stack a few slices and cut them into small pieces. Basil is often cut into thin shreds known as a chiffonade. To do this, start by stacking the basil leaves in a neat pile. Roll the stack of leaves into a cigar shape and slice crosswise into thin shreds. Chuck roast makes the best stew meat. Pull apart the roast at its major seams, delineated by lines of fat and silver skin. Use a knife as necessary. Trim off the excess fat and silver skin. Cut the meat into large chunks. The chunks can be cut into small cubes as needed for stews. A tied roast maintains its shape when cooked. Cut 2 2-foot pieces of butcher's twine. Wrap each piece around the roast, secure with a double knot, and then snip off excess twine. Flank steak is the best cut for stir fries. To make slicing easier, freeze the steak until firm, about 30 minutes. Slice the steak lengthwise with the grain into 2-inch wide strips. Slice each 2-inch strip thin on the bias and across the grain into 1/8-inch thick pieces. Before a bell pepper can be sliced, the stem, seeds, and white ribs inside the pepper must be removed. Start by trimming 1/2 inch from the top and bottom of the pepper, including the stem. Slice the pepper from top to bottom into several pieces that will sit flat on the cutting board. Trim the white ribs on the interior of each piece and remove any remaining seeds. Cut the pepper into strips, then chop if needed. Breadcrumbs made from fresh bread are far superior to store-bought crumbs. Tear the bread into small pieces, then pulse in a food processor to make coarse crumbs, about 8 pulses. Many recipes call for both the florets and the stalks. Place the head of broccoli upside down on a cutting board and cut off the florets. Slice the larger florets into 1 to 1.5-inch pieces by slicing them through the stem. Square the stalks by cutting away the tough outer 1/8 of an inch from each side. Slice the trimmed stalks into 1/4-inch thick pieces. For accurate measuring, brown sugar should be firmly packed in the measuring cup. Fill the correct dry measure with brown sugar, and then use the next smallest cup to pack it in. With a paring knife, trim a thin slice from the end of each Brussels sprout. Remove any discolored leaves. Slicing through the stem end, cut each Brussels sprout in half. For coleslaw and other salads, cabbage is usually cut into thin shreds. Start by cutting the cabbage into quarters. Then trim and discard the hard core from each quarter. Separate the cabbage into small stacks of leaves that flatten when pressed. Cut each stack of cabbage leaves into thin shreds. Carrots are often cut into thin strips, about the size of a matchstick. Start by cutting the peeled carrot into 2-inch lengths. Cut the 2-inch lengths into 1/4-inch planks. Lay the planks flat and cut them into 1/4-inch matchsticks. Because a carrot is so hard, it can be tricky to cut it into an even mince. Start by cutting the peeled carrot into 2-inch lengths. Cut the matchsticks crosswise into small pieces. Pull off any leaves, then cut out the core of the cauliflower using a paring knife. Separate the florets from the inner stem using the tip of a paring knife. Cut the larger florets into smaller pieces by slicing them through the stem. Cut the celery rib lengthwise into thin strips. Cut the strips crosswise into small pieces. To promote quick, even cooking, boneless, skinless chicken breasts are often pounded to reduce their thickness. After trimming any fat, lay the chicken breasts between 2 sheets of plastic wrap and pound until it is roughly 1/2 inch thick. Most of the heat in a chili resides in the seeds and white ribs. To remove them, cut off the stem and then slice the chili in half lengthwise. Remove the seeds and any white ribs from inside the chili. To distribute heat evenly in dishes, chilies are generally minced quite fine. Cut the chili into thin strips. Then slice the strips crosswise into very small pieces. Bar chocolate is easily chopped, but chocolate sold in thick blocks is a bit trickier. Hold a large knife at a 45-degree angle to one of the corners and bear down evenly. Repeat with the other corners. Chocolate can be melted in a double boiler on the stovetop. Chop it so it melts evenly and place it in a heat-proof bowl. Set the bowl over a pot of barely simmering water. The bowl shouldn't touch the water or the chocolate could scorch. Stir occasionally. Chocolate can be microwaved as long as you use moderate power and check it often. Microwave the chopped chocolate at half power for 2 minutes. Stir it and keep heating until melted, stirring once every additional minute. Many recipes call for whole kernels cut from fresh corn on the cob. To remove the kernels, stand the husked corn on end inside a large bowl and cut the kernels from the cob using a paring knife. Many recipes call for grating fresh corn on the cob into a puree. Grate the husked corn on the large holes of a box grater set in a large bowl. Using the back of a butter knife, scrape any remaining pulp from the cobs into the bowl with the grated corn. Cucumber can make salads very watery. To reduce liquid, remove seeds and surrounding core. Cut the peeled cucumber in half lengthwise. Use a small spoon to scoop out and discard the seeds. The cucumber can now be sliced or chopped as needed. For a clean break, crack the side of the egg on a flat surface rather than the edge of a mixing bowl. Over the bowl for the whites, use the broken shell halves to transfer the egg white from one shell to the other, leaving the yolk behind and intact. Once all of the white has fallen down into the bowl, transfer the yolk to a second bowl. Start by cutting off the stems and feathery fronds. Trim a very thin slice from the base. Slice the bulb in half from top to bottom. Cut out the triangle-shaped piece of the core in each half. The core is woody and tough. The fennel bulb can now be sliced as needed. To achieve a consistent amount of flour in recipes, measure by a method called dip and sweep. Dip the dry measuring cup into the flour container and sweep away excess flour with a straight-sided object, like a butter knife's back. Use the side of a chef's knife to tap the clove. The skin should loosen enough to remove by hand. Once the garlic has been peeled, we like to use a garlic press to mince it. A garlic press ensures that the pieces will be very fine. Even a sharp knife has a hard time mincing ginger due to the stringy fibers. When a smooth puree is needed, we grate the ginger instead. Peel a small section on a knob of fresh ginger. Using the unpeeled portion as a handle, grate the ginger on a rasp grater. Instead of trimming the ends of green beans one at a time, line the beans up on a cutting board and trim the ends from many with one stroke. After the herb has been washed and dried, pinch the leaves to separate them from the stems. Pile the leaves up on a cutting board and use a rocking motion to mince them with a chef's knife. Trim and discard the root and the tough dark green leaves. The dark green leaves can be reserved for making stocks. Cut the trimmed leek in half, lengthwise. Place the leek cut side down and cut crosswise into half-inch pieces. Leeks are generally quite sandy. Place the sliced leeks in a bowl of cold water and swish to loosen dirt. For maximum juice, roll the lemon on the counter. Push down hard as you roll. Be sure to buy soft lemons with thin skin. Hard ones have less juice. Halve the lemon. Squeeze the juice into a fine mesh strainer set over a bowl to trap seeds and pulp. Lemon zest, the colored portion of the peel, adds complex flavor to many recipes. Use a rasp grater to remove the colored zest. Try not to remove any of the white pith beneath the zest, as it is bitter. After scrubbing the shells, grasp the weedy protrusion called the beard between a paring knife's flat side and your thumb. Then tug to remove it. Use the side of a chef's knife to gently crush the olives. The pit should be easy to remove with your fingers. After the onion has been halved and peeled, make several horizontal cuts, almost from one end to the other. Your knife will be parallel to the cutting board. Don't cut through the root end. How closely you space the cuts in this step and the following ones will determine the size of the onion pieces when you're done. Make several vertical cuts in the onion, slicing pole to pole. Slice the onion across the vertical cuts, holding the onion with your fingertips and using your knuckles as a guide. Cut the onion in half through the ends or the poles of the onion. Place the onion half cut side down and trim a thin slice from each end. Peel the skin and any tough outer layers. After the onion has been halved and peeled, cut the onion pole to pole into thin or thick slices as needed. To chop oranges, you must first remove the skin and pith. Slicing from top to bottom, trim away the peel and bitter white pith. Follow the contours of the orange to remove as little flesh as possible. Cut the peeled orange in half from end to end and remove the stringy pith from its middle. Cut the orange into half-inch pieces. Peaches have a furry skin that is sometimes best removed. With a paring knife, Score a small X at the base of each peach. Lower the peaches into boiling water and simmer until the skins loosen. 30 to 60 seconds. Transfer the peaches immediately to a bowl of ice water and let cool for about 1 minute. Use a paring knife to remove strips of loosened peel, starting at the X on the base of each peach. Cut the pears in half from stem to blossom end. Use a small spoon to remove the core and the interior part of the stem. Trim off the bottom and top of the pineapple so that it will sit flat on the cutting board, resting the pineapple on the trimmed bottom. Cut off the skin in thin strips from top to bottom. Quarter the pineapple lengthwise, then cut the tough core from the inside of each quarter. The pineapple can now be cut into cubes or slices. A pork tenderloin is covered in places by a thin, clear membrane called the silver skin, which should be removed before cooking. Slip a knife under the silver skin. Angle the knife upward and use a gentle back and forth motion to remove it. Many recipes require cutting potatoes into neat dice. To start, use a vegetable peeler to remove the skin from the potatoes. Cut the peeled potatoes into half-inch thick planks. Stack several planks on top of each other and cut lengthwise into half-inch wide strips. Now cut the strips crosswise into half-inch cubes. To ensure a fluffy texture in pilafs and salads, it's best to rinse rice before cooking. Place the rice in a fine mesh strainer and rinse under cold water, swishing the grains with your fingers until the water runs clear. Salmon fillets and other fish can still contain the occasional small bone, called a pin bone. Run your fingers over the surface of the salmon to find any pin bones. They will feel like tiny bumps. Use clean tweezers to remove the bones. Salt pork generally comes with a tough rind attached. Place the salt pork on the cutting board with the rind facing up. Steadying the salt pork with one hand, use a sawing motion to cut away the rind in a single piece. The salt pork can now be cut into planks, then strips, and finally into small pieces. After trimming the roots and dried out dark green parts of the scallions, slice them thin. The small crescent-shaped muscle sometimes attached to the side of the scallop will be incredibly tough when cooked. Use your fingers to peel away this muscle from the side of each scallop. Lay the peeled shallot flat side down and make a series of closely spaced parallel cuts through the shallot, leaving the root end intact. Make several lengthwise cuts through the top of the shallot. Finally, thinly slice the shallot crosswise to create a fine mince. Then, turn the clove 90 degrees and make flat horizontal cuts through the middle. After removing the shell, use a paring knife to make a shallow cut along the back of the shrimp so that the vein is exposed. Use the tip of the knife to lift the vein out of the shrimp. Discard the vein by wiping the blade against a paper towel. Cut a thin slice from the top of the squash. Then use a sturdy vegetable peeler to remove the skin. Cut the squash crosswise just where the bulbous portion begins. There won't be any seeds in the top portion, which you can cut as desired. Halve the bulbous end, then use a spoon to remove the seeds and stringy fibers. Cut this portion into chunks. Use a paring knife to cut around the stem and remove the white core from each berry. Place the tomato on its side. Use a paring knife to cut around the core while rotating the tomato toward you. Remove the core. Steady the tomato with your hand and use a very sharp chef's knife to cut the tomato into thick slices. Cut each slice into strips and then into small pieces. Sometimes you want to remove the watery seeds before chopping round tomatoes. Remove the core, then slice along the tomato's equator. Gently squeeze the seeds out of each half, shaking the tomato a bit and using your fingers as needed to pull out any stragglers. Chop as desired. Sometimes you want to remove the watery seeds before chopping plum tomatoes. Cut the tomato in half lengthwise through the core end. Trim the core from each half. With your fingers, scoop out and discard the seeds. The tomato can now be chopped as desired. Place the tomato on its side. Use a paring knife to cut around the core while rotating the tomato toward you. Remove the core. It's easiest to slice the tomato through the core end. Steady it with your hand and use a very sharp chef's or serrated knife to cut thin slices. Baking delicate egg custards in a water bath prevents them from curdling. Set the baking dish with the custard in a roasting pan and fill the roasting pan with boiling water so that water comes halfway up the dish sides. The first step in many cookie and cake recipes is to beat softened butter and sugar until fluffy. The goal is to incorporate air into the mixture, which will help it rise in the oven. When fluffy, the butter and sugar should be smooth and billowy. with a texture like thick frosting. Many salads, dips, and chilled soups go into the refrigerator to cool down and give flavors a chance to blend. After flavors have melded, it's a good idea to check seasonings just before serving. Boiling means cooking food in liquid that's at 212 degrees at sea level. To achieve this, the burner should be set high enough so that the surface of the liquid is covered with large rolling bubbles. The temperature of ingredients is often crucial in bread and dessert recipes. Bring whole eggs to room temperature by placing them in a bowl of warm water for 5 minutes. Cut butter into chunks and let them soften on the counter for 30 to 60 minutes to raise the temperature. Garlic, spices, and nuts can easily burn, but it's hard to judge when this happens in a pan filled with other ingredients. Generally, when these ingredients are fragrant, they are cooked, and it's time to move on to the next step in the recipe. Onions and other vegetables are often cooked over moderate heat until softened. The goal is to extract their flavor through gentle cooking, but not to brown them. Onions will turn translucent, but many vegetables won't change color. When they soften, you're ready to move on to the next recipe step. Dredging chicken and meat with flour is simple. Hold the food by one end and drag it slowly across a shallow dish filled with flour. Turn the food over and repeat on the other side, shaking the food when you're done so any excess flour falls back into the dish. Many recipes instruct to add butter, herbs, and other ingredients off heat. In the case of butter, adding it off heat lets the butter melt evenly and thicken a sauce. Many fresh herbs have a delicate flavor, and it's best not to cook them. Slide the pan to a cool burner when a recipe says off heat. Many yeast bread recipes call for kneading dough until it is smooth and elastic. This is best accomplished in a stand mixer. We recommend finishing the process by hand, with the dough on a lightly floured counter. When the dough has a smooth surface and is no longer sticky, it has been sufficiently kneaded. Set it aside in a covered bowl to rise. Many of these recipes suggest mixing the wet and dry ingredients until combined, with just a few streaks of flour remaining. Small pockets of unincorporated flour will meld with the batter in the oven, so it's best to slightly undermix these batters. We recommend using a rubber spatula to combine the wet and dry ingredients, since it facilitates quick mixing and won't overwork batter. When pasta has been drained, we like to add it back into the empty and still warm pasta pot. We then add the sauce and toss to combine. Often the sauce will be too thick to coat the pasta evenly. We loosen the sauce with a little pasta cooking water, which you should reserve in a liquid measuring cup before the pasta is drained. Many simple quick breads and baked goods call for making a well in the dry ingredients and then adding the wet ingredients to the well. This makes the dry and wet combine easier and cuts down on mixing strokes, which can toughen pancakes and other quick breads. To make a well in the dry ingredients, use a rubber spatula or your hands to push the dry ingredients up the sides of the mixing bowl. Many sauces need simmering to concentrate flavors and thicken their consistency. This process is called reducing. Recipes generally say to reduce the liquid to a specific volume, so keep a liquid measuring cup near the stovetop. Pour the contents of the pan or pot into the measuring cup to see if it has reduced to the correct amount. To promote even baking of items like cake layers or cookies, recipes say to rotate and switch cake pans or baking sheets halfway through. Rotating means that pan should be turned so that the edge facing the front of the oven is now facing the back of the oven. Switching involves pans on separate oven racks that are switched so the pan on the top rack trades places with the pan on the bottom rack. An electric mixer saves time when mixing ingredients. However, the beaters on even the best mixer can miss some ingredients. For this reason, it's important to turn off the mixer from time to time and scrape down the sides of the bowl with a rubber spatula. You should also scrape any unincorporated ingredients stuck on the beaters back into the bowl so that they can be mixed in. Many recipes say to scrape up brown bits in pots and pans when cooking. That's because these brown bits are very flavorful, and you want them incorporated into whatever is being cooked. Use a wooden spoon to scrape up the brown bits. Adding a little liquid to the pan as you scrape can help loosen these brown bits. Seasoning to taste means just that. Taste the food and add a little salt and pepper. Taste again and consider adding more seasoning. In addition to salt and pepper, many recipes benefit from vinegar or lemon juice added at the same time, along with herbs added to taste. Simmering means cooking food in liquid that is below 212 degrees at sea level and hovers around the 200-degree mark. To achieve this, set the burner just high enough so that small bubbles break the surface of the liquid in places. Sweating is a gentle way to coax flavor from aromatic veggies, like leeks, carrots, celery, and onions, as they cook in butter or oil. To sweat veggies, cover the pot and reduce the heat. The lid traps steam so the vegetables don't brown. Sweat veggies until they are very soft. Some materials can react with highly acidic ingredients, such as lemon juice and tomatoes, which will create an off flavor or color. Stainless steel, glass, anodized aluminum, and enameled cast iron are non-reactive materials. Regular aluminum, copper, and regular cast iron are reactive and are generally not good choices when making lemon curd or tomato sauce. An oven-proof skillet has a handle that can withstand high oven temperatures. In general, this means a metal rather than a plastic handle. Of course, the handle will become blazing hot in the oven, so use an oven mitt to remove an oven-proof skillet from the oven. Leave the mitt on the handle after the skillet comes out of the oven to remind yourself that the handle is hot. Many older recipes regularly call for sifting flour and dry ingredients together. We find this process unnecessary in most cases. Instead, we simply use a whisk to combine dry ingredients and aerate them slightly. To cut down on cleanup, we often use the same pan to prepare multiple components in a recipe, wiping it clean between steps. Grab a wad of paper towels, held with tongs if the pan is very hot, and wipe the pan clean. Add fresh oil or butter and continue with the next step in the recipe. To make a good stew, you'll need to keep your eye on the heat. Stir it so that it does not burn, and add more water or broth if required. Mincing means cutting into 1/8-inch or smaller pieces. Lay the peeled and halved onion flat side down, and make a series of horizontal cuts through the onion, leaving the root end intact. As you make these cuts, your knife will be parallel to the cutting board. Chopping means cutting into 1/4 to 1/2-inch pieces. Lay the peeled and halved onion flat side down, and make a series of horizontal cuts through the onion, leaving the root end intact. As you make these cuts, your knife will be parallel to the cutting board. Make several vertical cuts, holding the onion with your fingertips and using your knuckles as a guide. All right, let's get started. All right, let's get going. Is this a good speed for you? Do you have all the utensils you need? That's it for preparations. Take a look at the example video. Okay, sorry, excuse me, what was that? Come again? Nice work. Well done. See you again soon. Congratulations. America's Test Kitchen. Let's get cooking. Good morning. Hello. Good evening. Good to see you again. Let's get cooking. Happy New Year. Here's to a new year in the kitchen. Happy birthday. Congratulations. I have a new recipe for you. Please touch Let's Get Cooking. It's time for some delicious home cooking. There's a new recipe available. Welcome to America's Test Kitchen. Let's get cooking. Before we go any further, please adjust my voice to the speed you like. Getting ready. Don't touch the game card or the power button. Enjoy the wonders of cooking with friends and family. Time's up. Can't decide what to eat? It's almost someone's birthday. It's almost time for a special event. It's almost the day of the big game. It's almost Valentine's Day. It's almost St. Patrick's Day. It's almost Easter. It's almost Cinco de Mayo. It's almost Mother's Day. It's almost Father's Day. It's almost Halloween. It's almost Thanksgiving. It's almost Christmas. It's almost New Year's Eve. Today is someone's birthday. Today is a special event. Today's the big game. Today is Valentine's Day. Today is St. Patrick's Day. Today is Easter. Today is Cinco de Mayo. Today is Mother's Day. Today is Father's Day. Today is Halloween. Today is Thanksgiving. Today is Christmas. Today is New Year's Eve. Suggested meals are available. Have a look. A Try It recipe was registered today. Let's take a look at the group calendar. A Try It recipe is registered for tomorrow. Do you have all the ingredients? Choose the cooks and the head chef. Choose the cooks and the main chef. Great. So are these duty assignments okay? You can change the assignment of duties whenever you want. When you're done, touch Cook. You're the next chef. Let's all cook together. Guest, please switch duties. You've made the person who wanted to make this dish happy. This software has many features to help your friends and family enjoy cooking. First, let's make a group profile. Touch Create New Profile to register a group profile. Enter the name of the group who will be using this software. If it's a family, you can use your family name. A new Try It recipe was saved. To see what recipes have been saved, touch Try It Recipes and have a look. A star has been given to a new recipe. To see which recipes have been given stars, Touch Updated Recipes and have a look. A recipe's been given 5 stars. Fantastic! To see what recipes have been given 5 stars, touch Updated Recipes and have a look. A note has been added to a recipe. To see what recipes have notes, touch Updated Recipes and have a look. A new event has been saved to the calendar. Touch Group Calendar and have a look. A new member has been saved to the group. Touch Try It Recipes and have a look. If you have a new party or event, save it to the group calendar. For recipes you want to cook, keep adding Try It marks. After you've tried a recipe, add stars. You can see the recipes ordered by star rankings in the recipe name list. An item was updated yesterday. If you haven't checked it yet, please do. How about cooking a recipe saved as Try It? Touch Try It Recipes to check out the saved recipes. How about cooking a recipe with lots of stars? View the recipes by name and touch the Star Rating tab to see recipes in the order of stars given. You can send other short recipes like soups and salads to another Nintendo DS. If you have 2 DS systems, you can make 2 things at the same time. Also, if you have friends interested in this software, you can send them recipes to try. You're the lead-off chef. It's almost the 4th of July. It's almost Labor Day. Today is the 4th of July. Today is Labor Day.